and we're here today with Deborah Minter, and we're going to be talking about her new novel, Underwood 5. And we're having a tea party today in honor of Clara Lofton. And tell me, what is your book about?
Well, basically, it is a story about a college student. Rachel Mallory is her name. And, you know, she's trying to meet her deadline, having fun with her friends. And one day she walks into an antique shop, and she purchases a typewriter with a very unusual surprise for her.
Sounds mysterious.
Yes, it is mysterious. Underwood 5, a cozy fantasy novel.
Oh, cool.
So.
That sounds quite cozy.
Yes. So here we have some books. Victorian Life in America. These are not all the books I chose to research the Edwardian era, but here are a few honorable mentions. The book by Helen Keller. We have one that's The Everyday Life of Victorian America, but it does reach to the 1900 Edwardian era. And here is some books here. One mentions Helen Keller, and as some readers might know, the story does mention the author Helen Keller at one point, and the scandal about plagiarism, which was unfortunate. But here we are. So tea time was quite the craze in America in the Edwardian era. It was a time of very opulent decoration, display, presentation, and tea time actually offered quite the social setting for young people, especially young women, young girls. It was a very strict society, and most of the time girls needed to be chaperoned, or they had a very rigid schedule. But tea time offered a type of social venue, and sometimes it even left some room for romance that they wouldn't find in other activities. And, you know, iced tea was a craze in America. Sugar was becoming a big deal, and so was music.
Okay, now here we have a totally different style. What's going on here?
This is basically the kind of things you will find on Rachel Mallory's desk. She is going to college. She absolutely needs her laptop. And she works at Starbucks, so she loves cups like this with funny little sayings. As you can see, it looks entirely different than a cup you'd find in the Edwardian era. But this one here says, "Don't ghost me," which is kind of funny because it suits the theme of Underwood 5. Basically, this juxtaposes the two completely different eras that these two girls live in. Rachel Mallory lives in the modern world, and Clara Lofton lived in the Edwardian era.
Interesting.
Okay. Tea time was quite the craze during the Edwardian era. It was a time of iced tea and sugar and confections, and it was the perfect opportunity to socialize with friends. After all, it was a type of strict, rigid era for young people. They could only hang out if they were being young girls, that is. They could only hang out if they were chaperoned. But tea time offered a little opportunity to basically have a moment of romance. Unfortunately, it was a very strict society in the Edwardian era. There were many rules about socializing and especially courting. But tea time actually offered an opportunity for young girls and women to have a bit of type of unrestricted romantic moment. Perhaps a love note or a glance or a gesture, without it compromising their reputation.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the Q&A segment of the interview. We're going to ask some very fun trivia questions that the fans want to know, and then we're going to move on to internet questions from the readers. Now, so first question, what was your favorite part about writing this book?
It's hard to just choose one part. I enjoyed different parts, different chapters of the book while I had my pen in my hand. But I would have to say it was the friendships. I really enjoyed writing the evolving friendships in the story. I loved writing Christopher and Rachel's friendship. And I actually liked the friendship that evolves between Clara and Rachel. Because as readers know, it was very awkward at first how they spoke to each other, but they actually become best friends.
It's always nice to have a friend. All right. And where did you get the idea to write this book?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, actually. there's kind of a bare word minimum that I try to keep up with. I try to pen 1,000 words a day. And one month during NaNoWriMo, all us writers were getting together and we were all trying to pick a prompt to basically meet our word count. So it was actually kind of a simple prompt. They told us, describe what it's like typing on a typewriter. Basically just to practice our words. But I was so bored at the time that I thought, I want to color this up a little. So I scratched it on my paper and I changed it to describe what it would like if you were typing on a typewriter and the words on the page came out different than what you typed.
Ooh, interesting idea.
Yeah, so I decided to play around with that, and then I just couldn't stop writing. And it actually, from that, I could not put my pen down, and it became Underwood 5.
Awesome. Why is the title Underwood 5?
Well, actually, the title Underwood 5 is because that is the model of Clara and Rachel's typewriter. That was a very popular model in the 1900s. There were other models, of course. There was the Remington. There's another one, too. I can't remember at the moment. But Underwood 5 became a very popular model in the Edwardian era.
So it's really specific to your timeline.
Right, it's to my timeline. And it actually became the image of what people think of when they think of a typewriter, Underwood 5. Very popular model.
Iconic.
Of typewriters, yes.
Was there anything else that inspired you to write the plot?
I would have to say the places I frequented. Obviously, much of the story was set on the campus, College of the Canyons, a real college, where Rachel is attending. And there were parts at the time when I was actually penning the story while I was on campus. So if anybody ever notices their conversation stolen while they were at the campus, it's probably for a reason.
Well, that's always fun.
Right, not all of it is what people were saying, but there's some parts in there. And then other than that, antique shops. I loved hanging out at antique shops. Now, if anyone's a little curious why Rachel Mallory did not know what a typewriter was, I actually overheard a conversation in an antique shop once where some college students were there and they did not know what a typewriter was. And the lady there explained it to the individuals. So then I asked the lady at the antique shop, I said, is that a common issue? People don't know what a typewriter is. She says it's very common for teenagers or college students to come in here. She says they do not know what a typewriter is.
Because they just have that a 20-year scope.
Right, it's before their time, so they don't know about a typewriter. They don't know about old-fashioned phones. Sometimes they didn't even know that a camera required film, which is something I also mentioned in Underwood 5.
Right, it's all the retro items.
Right, it's all the retro items. It's a time gone by.
Nice. Okay. What was the most challenging part while writing this book?
Well, other than mechanical things like formatting and editing, I would say the death scenes. They were really hard to write. I usually prefer comedy and lighthearted stories, and Underwood 5 is definitely a lighthearted, comical, cozy fantasy, but there were still some heavy moments in it. And
like
those were actually
real dramatic
right.
scenes.
I don't want to give spoilers away, but the heavier parts were tricky to write for me.
Okay. Are any of the characters based on real people?
Yes. Morgan, one of Rachel's friends, she's based on a real person I knew while I was in college. And yes, even her description, she was a real person.
Well, that makes me want to read about Morgan. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I would have to say probably.
And for those who don't know what pantser is, it's a very fascinating style of writing. It's somebody who just writes from beginning to end without even stopping or editing or anything, right?
Right. Now, a plotter is someone who drafts. So I would have to say I am definitely both. A lot of times, I know that there are some plotters, some writers who draft every detail about a character, what they're wearing, what they like, what's going to happen in the next scene, almost before they write it. I'm not quite like that, so I would have to say I'm somewhere in the middle. I will pants large sections of a book or a story, and I will also draft parts.
Well, I imagine when you get on a good trend, you're having fun and you don't want to stop, right?
It also depends on the project. Like in some cases, some stories I've written, I've literally just pantsed the entire thing. But most of the time I will pick at least the skeleton first, a little draft, and then I'll get started.
Okay. basic structure.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any significant parts or chapters that were deleted from the book?
Yes, and it was actually kind of sad for me to delete them, but that's part of the editing process. Now, there is one part, Christopher and all of them, they're talking about these squirrels in the trees. It's actually based off something that really did happen at the campus. Some writers spy on people's conversations. But I spied out these kids trying to engage with the squirrel in the tree, so I actually put it in the novel, but then at the end it was superfluous information, so I cut that out. Another part that was very significant to me, that actually went out last, was there's a conversation between Mr. Glass and Christopher. Christopher actually talks to Mr. Glass how he feels about Rachel. And I thought it was a very important scene, but there's only one problem. The whole entire novel is first-person narrative by Rachel's point of view, and this was Christopher's point of view. But I think I will add it on my website as extra features.
So we can all be flies on the wall.
Right, we can hear Christopher's point of view a little bit.
Got it, okay. And I believe this is the last question. What are you working on next? We all want to know.
Well, I am exploring a new genre. I usually like fantasy and lighthearted stories. I'm actually working on a short horror story.
Ah, scary, okay.
And there is a touch, I will let everyone know, of the Edwardian era in it. So.
Well, that's very interesting. You go from cozy fantasy to horror and in one fell swoop. That's interesting.
Well, not one fell swoop. I do go back and forth. I actually have a notebook of ideas, and I pick my favorites to work on. So,
well, we won't be able to wait for that next story or book. Okay, and I did have a request from an anonymous reader that you would read an excerpt from the book.
Okay, all right, one page. I eyed my black mystery. Christopher came over to me. So, how old are you? 21. Isn't that the same age as Clara? Yeah. Happy birthday. So you're her study partner, Brandon said. Yeah, he's my study partner. What does it matter? Brandon and Christopher looked at me oddly. I went over to Morgan and Riley. Brandon and Christopher were both kind of smart, though I hated admitting that about Brandon. Maybe they were just getting off on the wrong foot. It wasn't long before all of us were talking and laughing about other things besides love quotes. Riley had also brought a giant sparkling soda. Chris popped the lid off the glass soda bottle, letting the white foam flow out the top like real champagne. We cheered like we were toasting. Suddenly I heard the snapping sound. Didn't I turn the typewriter off? I thought absent-mindedly. My eyes widened, and I turned to look at the typewriter. It was typing by itself. The bar went back and forth as it continued to type. Christopher had turned to look at it as well. Our eyes met imperceptibly. Is it plugged in? I heard Riley's voice. We were watching it. I wasn't anywhere near it, but it was typing. It looked more furious than usual and louder, as if someone was sitting there typing it really fast. Anthony was staring at it. The typewriter slowed pace. The keys were coming down as if fingers were pressing them down. Everyone had gotten still. I looked around me to see everyone's eyes focused on the typewriter. The typewriter finally stopped. The room was quiet without the sound of the keys. What is that? What happened? Riley asked. Christopher looked at it with his curious eyes. Anthony was looking around at everybody's faces. I set my drink on the table and walked over to the typewriter. What does it say? Christopher asked me. Numbers, I said unsurely. Immersed in the note, I realized it was a place. It looks like an address. That's the same one from the other note, he said. Yeah, I think it is. I looked up and realized everyone was staring at us, absolutely silent.
Oh, wow. Just it announces to an entire room.
The typewriter has a mind of its own. That becomes established in the story for sure.
That sounds extremely entertaining. Like, I wanted to hear the reactions.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the reactions come out quite negative for Rachel. I don't want to give spoilers away, but it doesn't turn out too great for Rachel.
Oh,
Everyone's
no.
reactions, yes.
Okay, now we're going to read questions from the subscribers. A really fun part of the segment. This question is from Damaris Suarez, a reader. What inspired you to write this novel about this particular theme?
Again, I would have to say it was just the prompt. Just my imagination. I've actually always been intrigued with the Edwardian era and antiques. Not just the Edwardian era, the past. So other than the writing prompt, I would have to say it was my imagination. I just suddenly hit me the idea of doing a type of blending the future with the past.
No, juxtaposition.
Yeah, juxtaposition. It just basically hit me one day. So.
Okay. This question is from Isaiah Peters, an author. What inspired you to become a published author?
I guess the idea of having one of my stories in like a book in my hand.
Yes,
That's what gave me the
that's
idea,
always
because
fun.
I was actually writing as a hobby.
And I'd like to get a signed copy later.
right. I did it as a hobby, and I have my favorite books on my bookshelf, and I thought one day, well, what if I just added one of my stories in the bookshelf?
Very fun. This question is from Dale Patterson, a reader. What got you started into writing?
Being a reader, being a very avid bookworm, I actually always liked nonfiction and fiction, and I have my favorites. And then one day I didn't actually plan it, it just happened. I started writing as a hobby for fun.
You just get lost in those,
Right,
stories. All right. This question is from Jay Hunt from Twilight Book Readers. Did you use Twilight to inspire you?
Wow, gosh. Not this particular story, but Stephanie Meyer's in Twilight is just an inspiration, because not only is it fun to read those books, but Stephanie Meyer's has been an inspiration to all female authors. So yeah, not this particular story, because that one is about vampires and werewolves, right? But here, just my story is about fantasy and female protagonists. So I guess you could draw a correlation, but it's a completely different genre.
Some of the same aspects.
I think Stephanie Meyer's inspired female authors everywhere to put their stories on paper.
Interesting. Okay. Natalie Engel from Eric's Music. Do you think Gaston Leroux is a good writer?
Yes. I
Well, a
absolutely
classic,
love his
right?
books. Yes. And other than Phantom of the Opera being one of my favorite novels, I like his other stories as well. I like the way he took historical events and laced it in his fiction. And it's and he wasn't so far removed from that era, so he wrote about what he read about and experienced. So
Interesting. Okay. So those are the questions from the subscribers, and that's been a very interesting Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and a reader from Eric's Music asked if you could read a particular part in
All
the
right.
music room.
I believe that's on page 86. Time got away from us. I peeked out the tiny door, and it was already dark outside. I closed the door to the little room. No one had noticed us in here for hours. I was distracted. We had spent a long time in here studying and concentrating on the books. I had finally picked the padded piano bench to sit on. It was comfy compared to the stiff chairs on campus, and easier to pretend like we were playing if somebody saw us. It had gotten late. My focus had burned out. Maybe his had too, because he was randomly closing the books now. We started chatting and talking about the things in the room. He explained that the stand made it convenient for singers to follow their music sheet. I looked at the piano that could make music and wondered if Clara had played a song on one that looked like this. He sat on the piano bench. He asked me if I ever played. I had played with the keys of one a long time ago, but this was not the kind of piano I was used to seeing in the electronic shop of the mall. This one was big and black, like it was from a movie. Someone said there was a baby grand piano in the orchestra room that was gold. What was the difference between a baby grand and this one? He opened the book on the front of the piano. I shook my head. It looked too complicated to follow. It reminded me of one of the wallpapers on my computer. I sat closer to him. I'm not very good, I said. He looked at me like he was curious. He looked back at the white keys, grinning. Wow, I said, staring at how many keys there were. It looks so old-fashioned. They plug in, he said. He started to play. His fingers played the keys smoothly. It sounded pretty, much nicer than a keyboard. He was good. I unwittingly closed my eyes. It was soft, quiet, and slow. There was something sad about the song. Did you take lessons as a kid? I asked. I actually took classes and started reading music here. You learned that good taking classes now when you're older? I had heard once that someone could only learn music as a child. He smiled at me, that smile of his. I stared down at the keys as he continued to play. I reached out but didn't press them. His hand came close to mine anyways. He almost maneuvered around my hand to the white keys before the music broke. I'm sorry, I said awkwardly, feeling bad that maybe I ruined the song. He gently brushed around my hand. I didn't pull away and continued to press the keys softly. He smiled at me again without changing the soft tune. I almost smiled back. The door suddenly snapped open. The man with dark colors dressed like staff came in. We saw him pretty often in this building when the sun was already down. It's time to lock the rooms now, he said shortly. We talked a little bit more about the lesson and project we had to do. It was really late. The building was almost empty, so we went home.
Who doesn't love a guy who can play the piano?
Well, also I might add that the man who opened the door and curtly ended the session is actually was a true person.
I was going to say that. It sounds
He
like
sounded a little familiar to you. Yes. Well, he actually, I never knew exactly why, but he would clear everyone out at a certain time.
College of the Canyons, or anybody who's been, I don't know if this is a universally junior college experience, but I noticed with that particular college, they have staff who clear the rooms.
No, I mean, it's for a good reason, obviously, but I mean, I always assumed it was because the rules were closing, but now I was starting to wonder if it was to discourage any kind of romantic arrangements in the
Right.
rooms. Right.
Okay, well, it definitely goes along with the theme of Eric's music.
Yes, absolutely. Having one of those next.
Well, cheers. Now, is that myth correct? Where you're not supposed to? Are you or are you not supposed to stick your pinky finger out while you're drinking these teas?
Probably in Britain. America, believe it or not, was not as rigid about the rituals of tea. But still, the opulence and the social hour was very much intact all the same. In on both continents.